Henry sat at the kitchen table, the late afternoon sun filtering through the dim curtains, casting long shadows across a sea of bills and eviction notices. The weight of despair pressed down on him as he stared at the papers strewn about, each one a reminder of the life he once had and the future that now seemed shrouded in darkness. He rubbed his temples, willing the headache away, but the reality of their situation gnawed at him like a persistent ache. "Henry, we need to talk," Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts, filled with a mix of urgency and fear. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her brow furrowed. Her once bright eyes now carried the fatigue of worry, and Henry felt a pang of guilt at the sight of her. "I know, Sarah, He trailed off, unable to articulate the hopelessness that clung to him. Instead, he gestured to the disarray of papers before him. "It's all piling up. I don't know how we're going to make it through this month. Maybe we can sell some things? The old furniture? The TV?" Sarah suggested, stepping closer, her voice rising with desperation. "We have to find a way to keep this house for Lily's sake." Henry sighed, the weight of the world pressing heavily on his shoulders. "I don't want to sell anything. That's all we have left. I just need to find a job that pays better. Something that doesn't exist in this town," she interrupted, her voice trembling. "Henry, you've been looking for months. We're running out of time." His heart sank and he could feel his anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Don't you think I know that? I feel like a failure every time I look at you, every time I see Lily playing in her room, blissfully unaware of what's happening around us." "Henry, we can't give up," Sarah pleaded, her voice softening. She reached for his hand, but he pulled it away, feeling overwhelmed. The thought of failing his family was unbearable, yet that was exactly what was happening. He glanced towards the hallway where their daughter, Lily, played with her toys, her laughter echoing innocently through the house. "Maybe we should consider other options," Henry muttered, the idea lingering in the air like a dark cloud. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, and she opened her mouth to speak, but he cut her off. "I don't mean anything drastic, but we need to think outside the box." "Options like what?" she asked hesitantly, her voice shaky. "You're not suggesting—" "I don't know, Sarah," he snapped, frustration spilling over. "We need money, and fast. I'm just trying to think of a way to keep us afloat." The silence hung heavy between them, both of them aware of the unspoken desperation lurking beneath the surface. Sarah took a step back, her eyes misty. "Just promise me you won't do anything reckless. We'll figure this out together." Henry nodded, but deep down he felt the walls closing in around him. The idea of selling their beloved daughter was inconceivable, yet it floated like a spectre in the back of his mind. He swallowed hard, pushing the thought aside, but it clung to him like a shadow. Later that night, the kitchen was quiet, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. Henry found himself sitting alone at the bar of a dimly lit tavern, the air thick with smoke and the murmur of low conversations. He couldn't shake the feeling of hopelessness as he nursed a drink, the amber liquid swirling in his glass. His thoughts drifted back to the conversation with Sarah, and he felt the weight of despair creep back in. As if summoned by his thoughts, a figure slipped into the seat beside him. Dressed in a dark leather jacket and a shadowy demeanor, the man exuded an unsettling energy that made Henry instinctively tense up. "Rough night?" the man asked, his voice low and gravelly. He leaned in closer, his eyes glinting with an unsettling curiosity. Henry didn't respond, unsure of what to make of the stranger. He shifted uncomfortably, feeling the man's gaze bore into him. "I've seen you around here before," the man continued, unfazed by Henry's silence. "You look like a guy with problems, the kind that money can solve." Henry narrowed his eyes, skepticism rising. "What do you mean?" The man leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. "I know some people who could help you out. You just have to be willing to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" Henry asked, caution lacing his words. The man glanced around the bar, ensuring no one was within earshot, before he leaned closer again. "Let's just say, there are ways to make a quick buck, a little unconventional, but effective." Henry's heart raced as the man's words hung in the air. "I'm not interested in anything illegal," he said firmly. But the man only chuckled, a low, unsettling sound. "Who said anything about illegal? All I'm saying is, there are people who would pay handsomely for a child. You know, for adoption. The kind of life you can't provide for her right now." Henry felt the blood drain from his face, a wave of nausea washing over him. "You can't be serious," he whispered, horrified at the suggestion. "My daughter is not a commodity." "Relax," the man said, waving a dismissive hand. "I'm just offering you a way out. You'd be surprised how many couples are looking to adopt. They'll pay for the privilege." Henry shook his head vehemently, the very idea making his stomach churn. "No, I can't. I can't even think about that." The man leaned closer, his tone shifting to something more persuasive. "Think about it, Henry. A few $1,000s could clear your debts. You'd be free. It's not like you're selling her to some monster. You'd be giving her a better life." "That's not how this works," Henry snapped, his voice rising. "You don't understand. I love her." "Love isn't going to pay the rent," the man shot back, his eyes narrowing. "You're drowning, and you need to grab onto something, anything to stay afloat. This is just a business transaction." Henry felt a wave of heat rise in his chest, a mix of anger and desperation. "I'll find another way," he barked, pushing away from the bar. "I don't need your advice." As he stormed out of the bar, the man's laughter echoed behind him, a haunting reminder of the dark path that lay before him. The night air hit him like a slap, but deep down, the seed of the man's words had taken root and he couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to him. Later that night, Henry stood in the doorway of Lily's room, his heart aching as he watched her sleep. The soft glow of the nightlight illuminated her innocent face, her features relaxed in peaceful slumber. She looked so small and vulnerable, and in that moment the thought of ever letting her go felt like a knife twisting in his gut. As he watched her, guilt washed over him in waves. How could he even entertain the idea of selling her? Yet the weight of their financial troubles pressed heavily on his mind, intertwining with the love he felt for her. He wanted to protect her, to give her everything, but the truth was that he felt like a failure. "Daddy," Lily mumbled in her sleep, turning slightly, and Henry's heart shattered at the sound. "I'm here, sweetheart," he whispered, stepping closer to the bed. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, his heart aching with the realization of everything he stood to lose. "I promise I'll find a way. I won't let you down." But deep inside, he felt the darkness creeping in, the voice of despair whispering that he was already too late. As he stood there, the weight of his decisions loomed over him like a storm cloud, and he knew even then that the hardest decision of his life was yet to come. Henry sat in a small, sterile room at the adoption agency, the weight of his decision pressing down on him like a suffocating blanket. The walls were painted a sterile shade of beige, devoid of character, echoing the turmoil within him. In front of him, Evelyn and Tom, the couple who had expressed such eagerness to adopt Lily, occupied the other side of the table. Their smiles were broad, eyes shining with anticipation, but Henry could not shake the feeling of unease that settled in the pit of his stomach. "Henry, we're so grateful for this opportunity," Evelyn began, her voice smooth and melodic, yet something about it felt rehearsed, too polished to be genuine. "You have no idea how long we've waited for a child. This is a dream come true for us." Tom leaned forward, nodding vigorously. "We promised to give Lily everything she could ever want. A beautiful home, the best education, and so much love. She won't lack for anything." Henry's heart ached at their words. He had given them Lily's name, but she was so much more than that. She was his little girl, with her wild curls and infectious laughter, the one who could light up the gloomiest of days with just a smile. The thought of handing her over, of letting someone else raise her, felt like a betrayal to his own blood. "Lily is special," Henry said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She has so much potential. I just want to make sure she's truly happy." Evelyn's expression softened, and she reached across the table, placing a delicate hand on his. "We understand truly, and we want you to know that she will be cherished. We won't just provide for her. We will love her as our own. You will always be a part of her life." Henry pulled back, the warmth of her touch sending a shiver down his spine. "I don't want her to forget me," he admitted, guilt flooding through him. "I don't want to lose her completely." Tom interjected, his brow furrowed in concern. "You won't lose her, Henry. We're prepared to keep you updated, share photos, even arrange visits if that's what you want, but just think about it. She'll have opportunities you could never provide." The words hung in the air, tempting yet suffocating. Henry felt like he was standing on the edge of a precipice, staring down into an abyss. He had convinced himself that this was the best choice for Lily, but with every passing moment, doubt coiled tighter around his heart. "I need to think," he finally said, shaking his head as if to clear the fog clouding his mind. "I can't just sign this away." Evelyn's smile faltered, and for a fleeting moment, he saw a flicker of impatience cross her features. "Of course, take your time. But remember, this is a rare opportunity. We might not be here forever." Once the couple left, Henry leaned back in his chair, staring at the adoption papers sprawled before him. His name was already signed at the bottom, a promise etched in ink that felt more like a chain of guilt. He thought about Lily's laughter, the way her tiny hands would clutch at his fingers, and how she would beg him to read her bedtime stories. Each memory felt like a dagger, piercing through the fog of rationality that had settled over him. That night, Henry tossed and turned, unable to escape the torment of his thoughts. The ceiling above him loomed like a dark cloud, threatening to swallow him whole. He could hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of Sarah beside him, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside him. Guilt gnawed at him, relentless and unyielding. "Henry?" Sarah's voice broke through the silence, laced with concern. "Are you all right? You've been so distant lately." He turned to face her, the weight of his secret crashing down. "I've made some decisions that could change everything for us." "What do you mean?" she asked, propping herself up on one elbow, her eyes wide with concern. "You're scaring me." He hesitated, grappling with the words that felt like lead in his throat. "I met with a couple today. They want to adopt Lily." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and finally to a profound sadness. "Henry, you can't be serious. You can't just give her away. She's our daughter." "I know," he said, his voice cracking, "but I can't provide for her. We're drowning in debt, and I can't bear the thought of her suffering because of me. She deserves a better life." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, and she shook her head vehemently. "No, Henry. You can find a way. We can find a way. Selling our daughter is not the answer. It's not even an option." Her words hit him like a slap, and for a moment, he felt the flicker of hope ignited in her voice. But then, reality crashed back in, dark and relentless. "What do you want me to do, Sarah? We're out of options," he replied, frustration bubbling over. "Fight for her," she urged, desperation creeping into her tone. "We can figure something out. You're a good father. Don't let this desperation take you down a path you can't come back from." But how could he fight against the tide of financial ruin that threatened to drown them all? The next morning, he found himself seated at the same table, staring at the adoption papers once again. With a heavy heart, he picked up the pen, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. As he signed, a piece of his soul felt like it was being ripped away. Each stroke of the pen felt like a betrayal, a shattering of the dreams he once held for his family. When he finished, he looked up to see Evelyn and Tom watching him, their expressions a mixture of excitement and relief. "Thank you, Henry," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with gratitude. "You have no idea how much this means to us." But all Henry felt was emptiness. He handed them the papers, and as they took them, he felt as if he was handing over his heart. The moment Lily would be in their arms, his mind screamed that he was making a grave mistake. "Can I say goodbye?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Of course," Tom replied, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Take your time." As he walked down the hallway to the room where Lily was playing, his heart raced. Each step felt heavier than the last, and the laughter that echoed from the room felt like a cruel reminder of what he was about to lose. He paused at the door, watching her from a distance, her hair glowing in the sunlight, joy radiating from her every movement. "Daddy!" she squealed, her eyes lighting up as she spotted him. She ran to him, her arms outstretched, and he knelt to embrace her, the warmth of her small body sending waves of love crashing over him. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, fighting back tears. "I'm going to miss you so much." Lily pulled back, her face scrunching in confusion. "Why are you sad, Daddy? I'm going to be happy." "Yes, you will," he managed, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "You'll have everything you've ever wanted." "Will you come visit me?" she asked, her innocence cutting through him like a knife. "Of course I will," he promised, though he wasn't sure if he could keep that promise. The thought of watching her grow up from a distance was unbearable. "Okay," she chirped, oblivious to the turmoil within him. "Can you read me a story before I go?" "Absolutely," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. They settled on the floor, surrounded by her toys, and he opened her favorite book. As he read, he felt time slipping away, each word a reminder of the moments they would no longer share. When the story ended, Lily snuggled close, her head resting on his shoulder. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Lily," he replied, his voice breaking. "More than anything." As he prepared to leave, he knew this was the last time he would hold her, the last time he would hear her laughter echo through their home. He swallowed hard, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over. The door closed softly behind him, sealing away the life he had known. Outside, the sun felt too bright, almost mocking him. The weight of his decision settled heavily on his shoulders, and he fought the urge to turn back. But as he walked away, a sense of dread filled his heart. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Just as he reached the parking lot, a figure stepped out from the shadows, blocking his path. The stranger's eyes were cold and penetrating, sending a shiver down Henry's spine. "Just signed away your daughter, huh?" the man said, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. "What do you know about it?" Henry demanded, his voice shaking with anger and fear. "More than you think," the stranger replied, his gaze unyielding. "You should be careful about the choices you're making, Henry. There are consequences." With that, the man turned and walked away, leaving Henry standing there, heart racing, mind swirling with dread and confusion. The stranger's words echoed in his. Henry stood in the shadows of a cluster of trees, his heart heavy as he watched the sun cast a golden hue over the backyard of the home where Lily now lived. It had been 2 months since he had made the decision that had shattered his life, and he found himself unable to escape the gnawing guilt that consumed him. The laughter of children echoed from the yard, a sound that once filled his own home, now haunting him like a ghost. He clenched his fists, his knuckles white against the cold air. From this distance, he could see Lily playing with a small dog, her hair shining like spun gold in the sunlight. She was smiling, a sight he both cherished and despised. It was all he wanted for her, to be happy, but at what cost? "Daddy, look!" Lily shouted, her voice bright and carefree as she threw a ball for the dog. Henry felt a pang of longing tighten his chest. He wanted nothing more than to scoop her up in his arms, to feel her warmth against him, to tell her he loved her. But that was a luxury he could no longer afford, neither financially nor emotionally. "Henry!" A familiar voice broke through his thoughts. It was Sarah, her face drawn and weary as she approached. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't help it. I need to see her." "Watching from a distance isn't helping anyone," she replied, her tone sharp but laced with concern. "It's only making things worse for you." He turned away from the sight of Lily, an ache in his heart. "I thought this was what was best for her. I thought—" "You thought wrong," Sarah interrupted. "You sold our daughter, Henry. You need to face that." The words hit him like a slap. He had been trying to rationalize his actions, telling himself that it was for the best, but deep down, he knew the truth. He had failed her. As they stood in silence, the laughter of children faded into the background, replaced by the relentless ticking of a clock in Henry's mind. Each tick marked the passage of time, a reminder of his lost opportunities and the life he had taken away from Lily. "Maybe we could," Sarah began, her voice softening. "Do what?" he snapped, the bitterness spilling out. "Beg them to give her back? We both know that's not going to happen. I don't even know if she wants to come back. Look at her, she seems happy." "Or maybe she's just trying to cope," Sarah replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You can't keep punishing yourself like this. We need to move on." "Move on?" he echoed, incredulous. "You think I can just move on? I sold our daughter, Sarah. How do I live with that?" She stepped closer, reaching out to touch his arm. "I don't know, Henry. But you need to find a way. This isn't just hurting you, it's hurting us." Henry shook his head, the weight of his despair too heavy for him to bear. I can't just forget about her, about what I did. She deserves better." As he turned back to watch Lily, his heart clenched at the sight of her joy. In that moment, he felt a surge of anger mixed with helplessness. He had given her up, and all he could do now was stand by and watch as another family filled the role he was supposed to have. Meanwhile, in her new home, Lily played in the sunshine, but her heart carried a shadow. She was surrounded by toys and laughter, yet there was an emptiness she couldn't quite understand. Often, when she lay in bed at night, she thought about her old home. It felt like a distant dream, one she couldn't fully grasp. "Mummy, can we go to the park tomorrow?" Lily asked Evelyn, her adoptive mother, who was busy scrolling through her phone. "Of course, sweetheart," Evelyn replied absent-mindedly, barely looking up. "That sounds like fun." Lily smiled, but as she watched Evelyn, she felt a nagging sense that something was missing. There were moments when she would catch herself staring out the window, wondering why she didn't feel completely happy. Deep inside, she sensed a void, a longing for something or someone she couldn't name. "Lily, come help me with dinner," Evelyn called, snapping Lily from her thoughts. She rushed into the kitchen, eager to please, but as she stirred the pot of pasta, her mind wandered back to her father. "I wonder what Daddy is doing," she murmured under her breath. "Who did you call?" Evelyn asked, her voice sharp. "Daddy," Lily replied innocently. "I miss him." Evelyn's expression shifted, a shadow crossing her face for just a moment before she plastered on a smile. "You don't need to worry about him, sweetie. You have us now. We love you very much." Lily nodded, but the words felt hollow. Love was supposed to feel warm and safe, but sometimes it felt more like a blanket smothering her. She sighed, pushing the thoughts away as she focused on the dinner preparations. Back outside, as the sun began to set, Henry felt the chill of evening creep into his bones. The guilt wrapped around him like a shroud, leaving him cold and empty. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had made a grave mistake, one that would haunt him for the rest of his life. That night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the silence of their home now deafening. He could still hear Lily's laughter echoing in his mind, a melody that brought both joy and anguish. Suddenly, his phone buzzed on the nightstand, interrupting his thoughts. He reached for it, his heart racing as he saw an unfamiliar number flash on the screen. Who could this be? He wondered aloud, a sense of dread creeping in. He opened the message, his breath catching in his throat as he read the words. "I know what you did. You will face the consequences." His heart pounded in his chest and a cold sweat broke out on his brow. The stranger from the bar, the one who had known too much about his desperation, was reaching out again. "What do you want?" he whispered to himself, fear flooding through him. He jumped from the bed, pacing the small room, the weight of the message heavy on his mind. Was this a threat? Did the stranger know about Lily? Sinking back onto the bed, he buried his face in his hands. "What have I done?" he murmured, the walls closing in around him. He was trapped in a web of his own making, and now it seemed there was no escape. As the night dragged on, Henry wrestled with the implications of the message. Was he being watched? Was someone waiting for the right moment to expose him, to ruin what little life he had left? The uncertainty gnawed at him, and he could feel the darkness creeping closer, suffocating him with every thought. In the confines of his mind, a plan began to form, one that danced on the edges of desperation and hope. Perhaps there was a way to make things right, to face the stranger and confront the demons of his past. But would it be enough to save Lily, or would it only lead him deeper into the abyss? With a deep breath, he resolved to find out. Henry's nights had become a cacophony of fears and regrets. The shadows of his bedroom felt tangible, stretching across the walls like the tendrils of his guilt. He tossed and turned, the sheets tangled around him, but sleep offered no solace. Instead, it brought forth vivid nightmares, each one more harrowing than the last. In these dreams, he would see Lily, his sweet, innocent daughter, standing alone in a vast, empty space, her face streaked with tears, calling out for him. "Daddy, where are you?" The sound of her voice echoed in his mind, and each time it pierced through him like a knife, twisting deeper into his heart. He would wake up gasping, the remnants of her cries still ringing in his ears, and the emptiness of his bed felt like a physical weight pressing down on him. He could no longer deny the enormity of what he had done. In a desperate attempt to drown his sorrows, Henry found himself at the bottom of a bottle more often than not. Whiskey became his only companion on those long, lonely nights. He poured himself another drink, watching the amber liquid swirl in the glass, its warmth offering a momentary escape from the crushing reality of his life. But the alcohol only served to amplify his guilt, each sip a bitter reminder of the daughter he had sacrificed for what he once believed was their survival. "Just one more," he muttered to himself, raising the glass in a toast to the memories of laughter and bedtime stories that now felt like a cruel joke. Morning light filtered through the curtains, harsh and unforgiving. Henry's head throbbed as he stumbled into the kitchen, the remnants of his bender clinging to him like a shroud. The bills still lay scattered across the table, a testament to his failure. A crumpled eviction notice caught his eye, and he felt the familiar wave of despair wash over him. "Dad?" a small voice called from the hallway. He turned to see Lily standing there, her cherubic face illuminated by the morning sun, her hair a halo of golden curls. "Can we go to the park today?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with hope. He blinked, the vision so vivid it felt as if she were truly there, and he could almost reach out to touch her. But the illusion shattered as quickly as it formed, leaving him standing alone in the kitchen, the silence deafening. "Lily," he whispered, his heart aching for the little girl he had given away. The nightmares continued to haunt him, and the guilt festered like an open wound. Each day was a reminder of his cowardice, a relentless cycle of self-loathing that threatened to consume him. He knew he needed to do something, to confront the demons that plagued him and to seek some form of redemption. That evening, after yet another sleepless night, Henry made a decision. He would confront the stranger who had been following him. The private investigator had become a ghost in his life, lurking in the corners of his mind, reminding him of the deal he had made. He needed answers, and perhaps a sense of closure. He found himself standing in front of a dingy diner on the outskirts of town, the neon sign flickering like the hope that had long since died within him. The place smelled of stale coffee and greasy food, but it was the perfect spot for a clandestine meeting. As he stepped inside, the bell above the door jingled, announcing his presence. The investigator sat in a booth at the back, a man in his 50s with a weathered face and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through him. Henry approached cautiously, his heart racing. "You," the investigator said, his tone low and steady. "You're the one who signed the papers." "Yeah, I did," Henry replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know what you know about Evelyn and Tom." The investigator took a sip of his coffee, eyeing Henry with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "You're in over your head, you know. They're not the kind of people you want to mess with." "Why are you following me?" Henry pressed, desperation creeping into his voice. "I need to see Lily. I need to know she's okay." The investigator leaned back in the booth, crossing his arms. "Evelyn hired me to keep tabs on you. She's worried you might try to make trouble. You signed your rights away, Henry. You don't get to just waltz back into her life." Trouble? Henry echoed, his anger flaring. You have no idea what trouble is. I lost my daughter. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you sold her, the investigator shot back, his tone cutting. Henry clenched his fists, fighting the urge to lash out. I didn't know what else to do. I was desperate. Desperation can lead to terrible choices, the investigator replied, his voice softening slightly. But you need to understand, Henry, if you try to go after them, you won't just lose your daughter, you'll lose everything. The weight of those words hung in the air between them, a bitter reminder of the consequences of his actions. Henry felt a flicker of doubt creep in, but it was quickly extinguished by a surge of determination. I have to see her, he insisted, his voice steadier now. I'll find a way. With that, he stormed out of the diner, leaving the investigator behind. The cool night air hit him like a slap, and he took a deep breath, trying to shake off the confrontation. But as he walked home, the investigator's words echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder of his predicament. Days turned into weeks, and Henry's resolve only grew stronger. He began to formulate a plan, meticulously gathering details about Evelyn and Tom. He knew he had to be careful, to tread lightly, but the thought of Lily thriving without him gnawed at his soul. He often found himself watching the couple from a distance, observing their interactions with his daughter. Lily seemed to be flourishing, her laughter ringing through the air as she played in the yard. But there was an emptiness in her eyes that tugged at his heart. She would occasionally glance toward the gate, as if sensing his presence, and it filled him with a mixture of hope and sorrow. Is she happy? He would whisper to himself, the question hanging in the air like a ghost. One evening, as he sat on a park bench across the street from their house, he spotted Evelyn and Tom walking hand in hand, their faces alight with joy. But as they passed by, Henry noticed something. Evelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes. There was a coldness, a calculated demeanor that sent a shiver down his spine. Something was off, and he could feel it in his bones. This wasn't just a couple wanting to provide a loving home for a child. There was something darker lurking beneath the surface. With renewed urgency, Henry resolved to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind the facade of the perfect family. He needed to know what he was up against. The thought of Lily being in danger, of being used as a pawn in a game he couldn't comprehend, ignited a fire within him. As he prepared to set his plan in motion, he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Each day felt like a ticking clock, and he knew he had to act before it was too late. Henry sat in the dimly lit room, the smell of stale coffee and worn-out upholstery surrounding him. The support group met every Tuesday evening in the basement of a local community center, a place where parents like him sought solace and understanding. Tonight, his heart was heavy, weighed down by the guilt of his actions and the loss of Lily. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, listening to the stories of others, their pain echoing his own. Across the room, a woman spoke softly, her voice trembling with emotion. Clara, as she introduced herself, shared how she had lost her son to a tragic accident just a year ago. It feels like a part of me has been ripped away, she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I wake up every day hoping it was all just a nightmare, but the reality is too cruel to bear. Henry felt a pang of connection. He wanted to reach out, to tell her that he understood loss all too well, but the shame of his situation kept him silent. As Clara continued, he couldn't help but admire her strength. She spoke of finding ways to honor her son's memory, creating a scholarship in his name, helping other children in need. It was a powerful testament to her love and resilience, something Henry felt he had completely lost. After the meeting, as everyone filed out, Clara approached him. I saw you listening. You have a story too, don't you? Her voice was gentle, encouraging him to share. Henry hesitated, unsure of how to articulate the shame that clung to him. I sold my daughter, he finally managed to say, the confession tasting bitter on his tongue. I thought it was for the best, for her future, but now I can't stop thinking about how I failed her. Clara's expression softened, and she took a seat next to him. You did what you thought was right in a desperate moment, but it doesn't have to be the end of your story. You can still fight for her. Fight. The word resonated within him. Henry had felt like a puppet on strings, manipulated by his own circumstances. But what if he could take control? What if there was still a chance to reclaim Lily? Clara's conviction sparked something dormant inside him, a flicker of hope that had been extinguished since he signed those papers. "What do you mean?" he asked, searching Clara's face for answers. Clara leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You're her father. You have rights, even if you think you've lost them. If you believe she's in danger or being mistreated, you can take action. You need to find out more about the people who adopted her. There are always ways to fight back." Henry's mind raced as he absorbed her words. The idea of investigating Evelyn and Tom, the couple he had handed Lily over to, felt both daunting and exhilarating. He had been so paralyzed by guilt that he hadn't considered the possibility of reclaiming his daughter. "But I don't even know where to start," he admitted, uncertainty creeping back in. "Start by gathering information," Clara encouraged. "Look into their background, their past adoptions. You'd be surprised what you can find online or through public records. And don't forget to trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is." As she spoke, Henry felt a swell of determination rising within him. Clara's words acted as a catalyst, awakening a sense of purpose he had long thought buried. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady for the first time in weeks. "I'll find out everything I can about them." "Good," Clara replied, her eyes bright with encouragement. "And remember, you're not alone in this. I'm here if you need support." With newfound resolve, Henry left the community center that night, the weight on his shoulders feeling a little lighter. He returned home, the moon casting a silver glow over the familiar streets of his neighborhood. The memories of laughter and warmth flooded his mind, and for the first time since he had given Lily up, he felt a sense of clarity. He spent the following days diving into research, scouring the internet for any information he could find about Evelyn and Tom. He discovered a few articles about their lavish lifestyle and their seemingly perfect lives, but he also came across a few unsettling comments on forums discussing their past adoptions, whispers of children who had come into their lives, only to vanish when things didn't go as planned. The more he searched, the more unease settled in his stomach. It was clear that not everything was as it seemed. He found himself staring at the screen for hours, piecing together the puzzle of their lives, but he needed concrete evidence of wrongdoing to act. Just as he began to formulate a plan, he received an unexpected message. It was from the private investigator, the man who had approached him before. The dread washed over him as he read the message, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "We need to talk. It's urgent." The next day, they met in a secluded cafe away from prying eyes. The investigator, whose name was Mark, looked more serious than Henry remembered. He gestured for Henry to sit, his brow furrowed with concern. "I've been looking into Evelyn and Tom," Mark said, his voice low. "What I've found is troubling. They've had a series of adoptions, but many of them have ended in disaster. There are allegations of mistreatment, and in some cases the children have simply disappeared." Henry's heart raced at the implications of Mark's words. "What do you mean, disappeared?" he asked, dread pooling in his stomach. "Some of the children placed with them have gone missing under suspicious circumstances. The authorities have been alerted, but there's been little action due to their wealth and influence," Mark explained, his expression grave. "What if they're doing the same with Lily?" Henry's voice trembled with fear. "I have to get her back." Mark leaned in closer, his tone urgent. "You need to act quickly. If they are hiding something, they'll be on high alert. I can help you gather more evidence, but you have to be cautious. We need to tread carefully." Henry nodded, determination flooding through him. The thought of Lily in danger ignited a fire within him. He would do whatever it took to protect her, to bring her home. With Clara's encouragement and Mark's expertise, he felt ready to face the challenges ahead. As he left the cafe, a sense of purpose enveloped him. He was no longer the man who had made a desperate choice. He was a father determined to reclaim his daughter, a man fighting against the odds, and with every step he took, he felt the weight of guilt lifting, replaced by a burgeoning hope that perhaps, just perhaps, he could right the wrongs of his past. Henry sat at his cluttered dining table, the remnants of his past life surrounding him like ghosts. Bills, eviction notices, and empty takeout containers formed a chaotic landscape that mirrored his mind, fraying at the edges with worry and guilt. Clara's words echoed in his head, urging him to keep digging into Evelyn's background. With a renewed sense of determination, he picked up the phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed Clara's number. "Henry, is everything okay?" Clara's voice was warm, providing a stark contrast to the chill that had settled in his bones. "No, Clara, I need your help. I want to find out everything I can about Evelyn. I can't shake the feeling that something is off," he replied, desperation creeping into his tone. "I'll be right over," she said without hesitation. Within the hour, Clara arrived, her presence a calming force. They spent the afternoon poring over public records, adoption agencies, and local news articles. Each revelation chipped away at Henry's hope, replacing it with dread. Clara pointed to a newspaper clipping dated 5 years prior, showing an article about a couple who had lost their adopted child under suspicious circumstances. "Evelyn and Tom were involved in that case," Clara said, her voice steady but laced with concern. "They adopted a girl, and she went missing shortly after." Henry's heart raced. "What do you mean, missing?" Clara leaned closer, her finger tracing the article's headline. "It's like they just vanished. No one knows what happened to her. The authorities never found any leads." Henry felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "This can't be happening. I need to act fast." With Clara's encouragement, Henry decided to approach the local authorities. They drove to the police station, Henry's mind racing with thoughts of Lily. He could almost hear her laughter, a sound that now felt like a cruel reminder of his failures. As they entered the building, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "Can I help you?" a young officer asked, looking up from his computer. "Yes, I need to report something," Henry said, his voice shaking slightly. "It's about an adoption that was done under suspicious circumstances." "What kind of suspicious circumstances?" the officer asked, raising an eyebrow. Henry took a moment to compose himself. "I think the couple who adopted my daughter Lily might have a history of something dark. I found records of previous adoptions that ended tragically." The officer studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Let's step into my office." Inside the small, cluttered office, Henry recounted everything he had discovered about Evelyn and Tom. Clara stood by his side, offering silent support as he laid bare his fears. The officer took notes, his expression shifting from skepticism to concern as Henry detailed the missing child case. "I can't promise anything, but I'll look into it," the officer said, folding his notebook. "If what you say is true, we need to investigate." As they left the station, a sense of urgency fueled Henry's steps. "We need to find a way to get Lily back," he said to Clara, his heart pounding with determination. "Let's keep digging," Clara replied, her eyes alight with purpose. "We can't let her stay with them any longer." The next few days were a blur of late nights spent searching online databases and early mornings filled with phone calls to anyone who might have information. Henry's mind was a whirlwind of facts and figures, but one detail kept surfacing: Evelyn's obsession with children who exhibited unique abilities. "Look at this," Clara said one evening, her voice tinged with excitement. She pointed to a forum discussing rare children with extraordinary talents. "Evelyn has a pattern. She only adopts kids who show signs of something special." Henry's stomach churned as he processed the implications. "You think that's why she wanted Lily?" "It's possible," Clara said, her brow furrowing. "If Lily has a unique ability, Evelyn could be using her for something. We need to find out what Lily can do." Driven by desperation, Henry crafted a plan. He would confront Evelyn, demand to see Lily, and expose any truths he uncovered. Clara agreed to accompany him, her support unwavering. As they drove to Evelyn and Tom's lavish home, Henry's heart raced. The sprawling estate loomed before them, a stark reminder of everything he had lost. He parked the car, took a deep breath and stepped out, Clara following closely behind. They approached the front door, and Henry knocked with a sense of dread coiling in his stomach. After a moment, Evelyn answered, her demeanor warm yet unsettling. "Henry, what a surprise," she said, feigning delight. "What brings you here?" "Evelyn, I need to see Lily," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Evelyn's smile faltered for just a moment. "That's not really possible right now. She's busy." "Busy? Doing what?" Henry pressed, his frustration bubbling to the surface. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly, and Henry could sense the tension. "I assure you, she's perfectly happy here. We provide her with everything she needs." "That's not what I'm worried about," Henry replied, stepping closer. "I think you're hiding something. I know about the other children, Evelyn. I know they went missing." Evelyn's expression hardened. "You really shouldn't make accusations without proof, Henry." "Proof?" Clara interjected, her voice strong. "What about the proof of your past, the children you've adopted and lost?" "What are you trying to imply?" Evelyn's tone turned icy. "I'm saying you're not fit to raise Lily," Henry said, his heart racing. "You're using her for something, aren't you?" Before Evelyn could respond, the door swung open wider, revealing Tom standing behind her, an imposing figure. "What's going on here?" he demanded, eyes narrowing at Henry and Clara. "We're just having a conversation," Evelyn replied, her voice smooth but laced with tension. Henry took a step back, feeling cornered but resolute. "I'm not leaving without Lily. I know she's not safe with you." Tom stepped forward, his presence intimidating. "You need to leave. Now." Clara, sensing Henry's rising panic, placed a hand on his arm. "We won't leave without her," she said firmly. As the confrontation escalated, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Just then, a voice broke through the chaos. "Daddy!" Henry turned to see Lily standing at the top of the staircase, her small figure illuminated by the soft light from the hallway. In that moment, everything else faded away. "Lily!" he exclaimed, relief flooding through him. He reached out, but Evelyn stepped in front of him. "Lily, sweetheart, come back here," Evelyn said, her voice sharp. "Daddy, I want to go home," Lily said, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. Henry's heart shattered at her words. "I'm here, Lily. I'm here to take you home. You don't have to stay with them." Evelyn's expression shifted, her composure crumbling. "You don't understand, Henry. She's special. She has abilities that—" "Abilities?" Henry echoed, his heart racing. "What kind of abilities?" Evelyn hesitated, the truth hanging in the air like a dark cloud. "She can—" "Lily, come here," Henry called, desperation lacing his voice. But before Lily could move, Evelyn stepped forward, her demeanor shifting once again to that of a controlling guardian. "Lily, you need to stay with us. You know what happens when you don't follow the rules." Henry felt a surge of anger. "You're manipulating her. This isn't a home. It's a prison." Suddenly, Lily's eyes glimmered with an ethereal light, and for a brief moment, the room felt charged with energy. "Daddy, I can help you," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Henry asked, his heart racing. "I've been waiting for you," Lily said, her gaze unwavering. "I can show you how to defeat her." The revelation hit Henry like a thunderbolt. Lily wasn't just a victim. She was a beacon of hope, a light in the darkness that surrounded him. The realization ignited a fire within him, pushing him to fight for her freedom and their future. "Get away from her," Henry shouted, stepping between Evelyn and his daughter. In that moment, the bonds of desperation and sacrifice transformed into a fierce determination. He would do anything to protect Lily, to reclaim the bond they once shared. As the darkness loomed around them, the light of their connection shone brighter than ever.